Hi everyone, and welcome to the Greek Diaspora Heritage panel. My topic today is going to be on the transmission of Greek language heritage in the cosmopolitanization era, the example of Greek ethnic schools in Australia. It is important to address cosmopolitanization era as the extended framework in which Greek ethnic schools operate. And of course, this context is characterized by super diversity, interconnectivity, reflexivity, global awareness, redetermination of identity, renationalization, and radicalization. And why is that? Because people are imperatively and coercively connected as new forces interlink markets, states, religions, cultures, and life worlds of common people. Cosmopolitanization is the constant presence and mix of natives, the familiar others, and the alien, the exotic others, as Ulrich Beck has put it. And of course, cosmopolitanization occurs from inside because of this mixing. In this context, identity cannot longer be shaped by the opposition to others and the dichotomy of we versus them. Identity is a very fluid concept developed and constructed over time through the experiences that people have in their living. In this sort of idea of fluidity and identity formation, an important aspect is the valuing of cultural heritage. Cultural heritage is an important component of identity, and it is in fact an intellectual act of humans to secure a sense of continuity, to reinforce cultural identity, to take ownership of their living communities, and harness cultural diversity for future sustainability. At the same time, this act, the human act of valuing cultural heritage, encourages a sense of responsibility, reciprocity, and mutual respect for cultural expressions of other people, and of course aims at inclusiveness and social cohesion. Heritage languages is a very important manifestation of cultural heritage and transmission in multilingual and plurilingual contexts. It is the quintessential symbol of groups' authenticity, as many researchers have put it in the past. However, it's not an ethno-specific issue alone, confined in traditional binaries us versus others. Language teaching is for global processes and a key factor to sustain personal and professional growth, inclusive participation in civic pluralistic societies, and of course, in undertaking is a very important skill in undertaking a new intercultural citizenship. Greek ethnic schools in Australia became important and highly acceptable community mechanism for transmitting Greek language and cultural heritage. It was a bulwark against assimilation, a defense mechanism against assimilation at first place. It was a moral imperative to secure a sense of historicity and group solidarity. It was finally a topos of socialization, an authentic environment, cultural environment that language could take place. Overall, ethnic schools, from a retrospective account, it was a place, or it can operate as a place of personal and collective memory, as Chrysanthopoulos has put it, or furthermore can be a place of social memory where triadic relationships, as Arvanitis back in 2000 has put it. These triadic relationships form a very important and complex framework of interconnected actions and interconnected point of views in terms of forming the nature of these schools. At the same time, now Greek ethnic schools, after 100 years of operation, they need to deal with the modern and a very complicated context, that of cosmopolitanization, as we put it before, and of course, the important issue of intergenerational shift as we go through from one generation to another, and as we have to confront mixed marriages, for example. The target of ethnic schools has been traditionally students from Greek descent, but during the last years, two decades since my PhD thesis was completed in 2000, we have a lot of students from third, fourth generation. So all these new mixing creates new challenges for ethnic schools and directs these institutions to acquire a transformative nature, away from methodological ethnocentricity or nationalism, as Beck has put it, which considers languages as an exotic exemption to a standard national language or as a separate multilingualism. Greek schools has constituted heterotopias, depicting the real and fundamental place where cultural representation and expression occurs, combining simultaneously multiple and incompatible spaces and contested images, as Chalidis has put it. Identity formation and language learning it's an important aspect of ethnic schools, but for not only for ethnic, but for global purposes. So this directs the actual change that we need to experience in ethnic schools, which leads to pedagogical transformation. Capturing the contingent and creative throw togetherness of languages is important even in the ethnic school context. Diaspora schools constitute sites of translanguaging because of the territorial and temporal characteristics and the change that all these characteristics have, which leads to their definition and the creation of a new intermediate third space of belonging and global civility. And of course, a place that coordinated actions for cultural maintenance can occur. Breaking nation-state boundaries in a conflict and yet unifying way is evidenced in the mixing of languages, multiliteracies and translanguaging, even in ethnic schools. Ethnic schools, in other ways, break down the notion of state boundaries and the notion of teaching the language in the confines of its ethnic boundaries. Why is that? Because the audience and the student population of these schools are carriers of multiple languages, multiple identities, and they're able to do translanguaging, to use different languages in a unitary sort of system in order to support communication. Thus, diaspora schools, Greek ethnic schools in Australia, they need to make a shift from subtractive or additive bilingualism, the conceptual and pedagogical separation of languages, to pragmatic and strategic use of more than one languages at a time in social and pedagogical practice. In other words, they need to harness the linguistic repertoires, the diverse linguistic repertoires that students bring into these schools in order to provide a more efficient pedagogy. And this pedagogy needs to be transformed. And we're talking about the methodological shift, the removal of ethnic lenses, the valuing of individual diversity, the considering of non-territorial geographical understanding of space or for a cultural awareness and identification, and of being self-reflexive about practices and power of agency. In other ways, to empower students to bring all the cultural and linguistic repertoire they've got in the classroom and within their daily school practices in order to make meaning of these language learning and of these valuing of language heritage and diversity. And of course, this methodological shift needs to take into account generational shift, language shift to cultural aspects, and then renewal of intercultural diversity, language pedagogy, and its epistemology. In other ways, we need to rethink language pedagogy within ethnic schools, taking into account all these variables, such as the generational shift, the shift from one generation to another, and the focus of language and heritage, language and cultural transmission, which is more associated with promoting the cultural aspects of language. In order to do so, we need to target and train culturally responsive teachers. And these the teaching force needs to have three things. First, to be aware of socio-cultural transformation and culturalization that affects students, including the knowledge of students' cultural capital, the factual information about the cultural particularities that the students can bring. The fact that we are directing ourselves to students of Greek descent, it doesn't mean that we are referring to a homogenized mass. All these students bring a diverse language and cultural repertoire and language sort of baggage with them. So we need to address this background within our respective teaching practice. The second important aspect for concerning culturally responsive teachers, they need to hold a strong theoretical knowledge for an inclusive and culturally responsive curriculum and how to transform curriculum in order to match student needs, which change over time or all the time. And of course, how to demonstrate instructional design skills and differentiated practice. The differentiation of practice and the design that the teachers need to do, it's very important, as in this design, they can capture all the wealth, the cultural wealth that students can bring into the school practice. We have tested here in Greece and elsewhere a particular epistemological framework of learning by design, which gives us the possibility to differentiate school practice, even in Greek ethnic schools or in any school, in order to provide these affordances, the affordances of differentiating the practice and of getting all the experiences that students have in order to capitalize in these experiences. And the final point that the culturally responsive teachers need to have is to act as reflective practitioners of their own professional learning, being exposed to diverse concepts, methods, and tools. So it's important for teachers within schools to have this kind of orientation in order to be flexible and receptive to different methods, and of course to alternate their methods according to the practical needs that they face. In conclusion, I would like to say that Greek ethnic schools, as a basic mechanism for transmitting language and culture in Australia, they need to build on the intercultural capital of their students and their respective school communities. Schools act as zones, contact zones generating intercultural capital. And this capital refers to the inclusivity that schools can bring, the dynamic convergence, cultural convergence that can occur within schools, and the collaborative and intercultural learning. And of course, the actual networks that they can build and they are building in terms of school friendships and socialization of children. All these interactivity creates intercultural capital. And of course, Greek ethnic schools embrace cultural heritage and language manifestations in all its traditional, contemporary, and living manifestations. So it's important to keep that in mind and provide a very rich learning experience to students. Another 3 points I would like to make as a conclusion is that Greek ethnic schools transmit multifaceted forms of identities and personal expression. So, in other words, can be the platform, can be the basis, can be the space for all these, the intermediate space or the third space for all this hybridity. And that's important. And that's important not only because it occurs, but because it has to be taken into account by school principals and providers. And finally, Greek ethnic schools with their own paradigm and their own operation sustain inclusive societies and reflect on a global civility, reflect on the fact that their students are citizens of another country, different, you know, the country that they live, but at the same time, they've got different linkages with other parts of the world, and they discuss this identity, and they discuss this kind of ideas and connections they've got within a particular school. And that's important for students to be able to explore all these parameters and levels and multiple layers of their identities, and be able to reflect on a global scale and to be able to feel that they are global citizens with multiple connections everywhere. So thank you for this, for your attention, and I'll be very happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.